BYD's replacement for the Atto 3 is no longer just a teaser. It has been revealed in China, it is much bigger, it moves to rear-wheel drive and it gets 800-volt architecture. Porsche has taken the electric Cayenne and turned it into an 850-kilowatt coupe SUV. Kia's new electric van is already pulling in orders before it officially lands here, but Kia's smallest EV is stuck in the numbers game for Australia, and Chery is not bringing one new brand to Australia. It is lining up Lepas, iCar, J-Tour, Freelander and more. This is Plugged in Australia. G'day, welcome back to Plugged in Australia, episode 45 for Tuesday, the 28th of April, 2026. Today we've got a big Beijing Motor Show catch-up with new metal from BYD, from Zeekr, Nissan, LDV, Kia, Porsche, Audi and the Chery-backed brands. They're all heading our ways. Some of it is locked in for Australia, some is still under study, and some is a warning shot for where the market is heading. Let's get into it. Alright, the big one this week is BYD's next generation Yuan Plus, the model that has been sold in Australia as the Atto 3. Now, this is not just a mild facelift, it is a much larger and more mature SUV that moves the nameplate closer to Tesla Model Y territory than the compact SUV class the current Atto 3 helped open up in Australia. The new model measures 4,665mm long, 1,895mm wide and 1,675mm tall, sitting on a 2,770mm wheelbase. Now that makes it 210mm longer, 20mm wider, 60mm taller and 50mm longer in wheelbase than the current Atto 3. That size increase matters because the original Atto 3 was successful here partly because it landed as a practical, affordable, small to medium EV at a time when there weren't many genuine alternatives. However, this new one is pushing it into a different space. At 4,665mm long, it is no longer just a small SUV rival for things like the MG ZS EV or the Chery E5. It starts to look more like a family SUV alternative to the Geely EX5, the Kia EV5, the Tesla Model Y and even BYD's own growing C-Line range. That is probably why New Zealand is expected to badge it as the Atto 5 rather than the Atto 3 when it arrives there in 2027. BYD Australia has not confirmed whether it will follow the same naming path, but the logic is pretty obvious. The car is physically bigger and technically more serious than the current Atto 3. Under the skin, the new Yuan Plus moves to an 800-volt electrical architecture and switches from front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive. Two single-motor versions are expected, one producing 200 kilowatts and a stronger version producing 240 kilowatts. Both are a reasonably big jump over the current Australian Atto 3, which currently makes 150 kilowatts. Battery sizes reported from China include a 57.6 kilowatt-hour pack with the 200 kilowatt-hour motor and a claimed 540 kilometer CLTC range, or a 68.8 kilowatt-hour pack with the 240 kilowatt motor and a claimed 630 kilometer CLTC range. So remember to take those CLTC ranges with a large pinch of salt there. Both use BYD's second generation blade battery technology and are claimed to support ultra-fast flash charging from 10 to 97% in under 9 minutes. Now that charging claim is pretty big, but we need to be careful with it. It is a China market claim on Chinese infrastructure under conditions that we may not reflect what Australian drivers will see at public charges. However, even with that caveat, it shows where BYD is heading. BYD is trying to make charging stops feel more like fuel stops, especially for mainstream family SUVs. Inside, BYD has also walked away from some of the original Atto 3's more divisive, gym-inspired weirdness, the little guitar strings on the doors. The new cabin looks cleaner and more conventional, with a large central screen, a 50-watt wireless phone charger, a relocated gear selector, and a more minimalist center console. There are still some playful elements, but this looks like BYD has realised the Atto 3 is no longer just a challenger brand novelty. It is now a mainstream global SUV, and the interior has to appeal to people cross-shopping established brands. The boot claim is also worth mentioning, the BYD quoting 750 litres of cargo space, although that is likely measured to the roof, not the parcel shelf, in the way that many Australian buyers would compare it. There is also a claimed 180-litre frunk under the bonnet, which is a very useful number, carries through to export versions, we hope. A powered front lid is also mentioned in the China market reveal, which sounds minor, but is genuinely useful if you are using that space daily for cables, bags, or smaller items. Anybody with an EV that has a frunk just knows it's a pain in the backside to get it up. You feel like you're lifting the lid on your engine bay. A powered frunk would be fantastic. I know a lot of Tesla Model Y owners have retrofitted that sort of technology to their frunk. Just makes it much more usable day to day. For Australia, the hard truth is that this may not be the next Atto 3 we get first. Approval documents have already pointed to an Atto 3 Evo for our market. The Evo appears to be a heavily revised version of the current car, rather than this all-new larger SUV. It is expected to keep the smaller body, but move to rear-wheel drive, with optional all-wheel drive and a larger 75.8 kilowatt-hour battery. So Australian buyers may see a two-step transition. First, an Atto 3 Evo to keep the existing model fresh, then the bigger new Yuan Plus or Atto 5 style vehicle later. That is important for buyers. If you are about to buy a current Atto 3, it is worth knowing there are at least two future developments circling. The Evo update that could be closer to Australia, and a much larger second generation car that may arrive later, probably next year, under a different name. But it's also worth saying this clearly. Future models do not make current cars bad. The Atto 3 is still a known quantity with local sales history, local support, and proven real-world ownership. The new one looks impressive. However, Australian timing, pricing, specification, warranty details, and charging performance on our infrastructure still needs to be confirmed. BYD did not just show a bigger Atto 3, it also revealed how aggressive it wants to be at the top end of the SUV and performance market. The Sealion 08 is BYD's new flagship Ocean Series 3-row SUV, sitting above models like the Dolphin, Seal, Sealion 6, Sealion 7 and the Sealion 8. Chinese filings indicate both plug-in hybrid and fully electric versions. However, the vehicle shown so far is the full EV version. BYD claims up to 900 kilometers of range on China's CLTC test cycle, and the display car wore a 4.9 second badge for the 0 to 100 km/h sprint. The Sealion 08 is expected to share technology with BYD's larger Dynasty series, the Great Tang SUV. The electric version is reported to use a dual-motor, all-wheel drive powertrain with up to 480 kilowatts and a very large 130.5 kilowatt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery, using BYD's second-generation blade technology. Charging claims are again enormous, 10 to 97% in as little as 9 minutes. As always, those claims need to be treated carefully until we see independent testing. Australian spec cars and compatible charging infrastructure, but the direction is obvious. BYD wants charging time to become less of an argument against EVs, especially for larger family SUVs. The Great Tang itself reportedly attracted 30,000 pre-orders in 24 hours in China, with a starting price equivalent to around 51,000 Australian dollars. It is offered with a 105.8 kilowatt-hour and a 130.1 kilowatt-hour Blade Battery 2.0 pack, and the same headline flash charging claim, 10 to 70% in 5 minutes or 10 to 97 in 9 minutes. That is the kind of number that changes the public conversation, but only if it arrives in production cars, works repeatedly, does not cook the battery, and is supported by enough high-power chargers, which I think is going to be the issue here in Australia. We just do not have anywhere near enough high-power chargers like that. Then there is the wild end of the BYD story, the Yangwang U9 Xtreme. One example has been secured for Australia. However, it's not coming here as a normal showroom model. Only 30 U9 Xtremes will be produced globally, all in left-hand drive, and Australia's single allocation has been bought by good old Nick Politis from Eagers Automotive. It is who's also the chairman of the Roosters, amongst many other things that old Mr. Politis is involved in. It is more than $1 million electric supercar with 2,220 kilowatts and a claimed top speed of 496 kilometers an hour. It is reportedly to be used to promote BYD and Denza in Australia rather than sold as a regular local model. The U9 Xtreme is not going to move the Australian EV market by itself. One left-hand drive hypercar does not change what families, tradies or fleets can buy or want, but it's a brand signal and it is huge. BYD is no longer just the company that gave Australia the Atto 3, the Dolphin and the Seal. It is now trying to cover everything from affordable city cars to plug-in utes, family SUVs, luxury people movers. You've got your Denza premium models and then obviously $1 million electric hypercars. The challenge for Australia will be whether BYD can keep service, parts, software support, resale values and charging promises moving at the same pace as the product launches. Kia Australia is preparing to launch the PV5 Cargo, its first electric van, and the early signs are good. The PV5 Cargo is priced at $55,990 before on-road costs and is due for local release in late May of 2026. Initially in S long-range form, Kia says the van has already somewhat exceeded early expectations before it is officially in market, with dealers taking orders ahead of launch. For Australian businesses, the most important numbers are price and range. The PV5 Cargo undercuts several existing electric vans by at least $6,000, including the Peugeot e-Partner, the LDV eDeliver 7, and the Volkswagen ID Buzz Cargo, although Horizon's V7e has now slipped underneath it at $49,990 drive away. The Kia runs a single-motor front-wheel drive setup and claims 416 kilometres of WLTP range, which is a strong number for urban delivery, mobile trade work, local government fleets and businesses that return to base each night. The interesting part is that early interest is not just coming from national fleets. Kia says orders have been split between business and private buyers, with some customers looking to customize the interior. One example given was fitting the van out for surfboards and surf lesson equipment. It's pretty cool. This is exactly where electric vans can get more interesting in Australia. They are not just courier boxes. They can be camper bases, mobile workshops, community transport vehicles, accessible transport conversions, and weekend adventure vans. Kia has also offered a much broader PV5 family overseas, including cab chassis versions, tray bodies, and wheelchair-friendly people movers. However, those are not locked in for Australia yet. That is a missed opportunity if Kia waits too long, because Australian buyers love body style flexibility. A cab chassis EV van platform would matter for councils, tradies, last mile delivery, maintenance teams and specialist fit-outs. The first cargo variant, it's a good start, but the platform will become far more useful here if Kia commits to more configurations. Kia's EV story this week is not only about vans and future utes. The smallest dedicated Kia EV, the EV2, is still technically on the table for Australia, although Kia Australia is being very careful not to overpromise. The EV2 is a pint-sized SUV-style electric car designed primarily for Europe, sitting between a BYD Atto 1 and Atto 2 in its size. That alone makes it interesting for Australia, because our entry-level EV market is suddenly getting crowded with smaller, cheaper Chinese electric cars and SUVs. The problem is not demand, the problem is price. The EV2 is built in Slovakia, not South Korea or China, and Slovakia is landlocked. That means the car has to travel by train before it even gets to a ship, and then it still needs the long sea journey to Australia. Add in European production costs and an often unhelpful euro to Australian dollar exchange rate, and the business case gets very difficult very quickly. Kia Australia CEO Damien Meredith says the EV2 remains under discussion. However, the company still has not made a final decision. He said Kia has pulled cars from Europe before, including previous Sportage models and the Proceed GT hot hatch from the same factory, so it's not impossible. But he also said the pricing and logistics are making it very difficult to get an affirmative answer. That is the key point. The EV2 would have to compete against budget-priced Chinese EVs in the roughly $30,000 to $40,000 drive-away space, depending on battery size, range, and equipment, and that is a brutal place to play right now. Kia's larger EV3 is currently listed at $46,990 drive-away on special offer at the moment, about $10,000 more than an entry-level Atto 2, and broadly similar money to the roomier Atto 3. If the EV2 lands only slightly below the EV3, it becomes very hard to explain to buyers why they should choose the smaller car. The European pricing shows the problem very clearly. In Europe, the EV2 starts from €28,500, which was quoted at about 49,500 Australian. Well, the EV3 starts from 35,990, around 62,600 Australian. But the comparison gets messy when you look at the BYD. In Europe, the BYD Atto 2 is priced at €31,990, while in Australia it starts at €31,990 plus on roads Aussie dollars. So Kia cannot simply convert European pricing and call it a day. Australian buyers will judge the EV2 against local Chinese brand pricing, not against European small car pricing. On the spec sheet, the EV2 itself looks useful. Smaller than a Toyota Yaris Cross and is available overseas with 2 battery and motor combinations. The entry-level version uses a 42.2 kilowatt-hour battery and a 100 kilowatt motor with a WLTP range of 317 kilometers. The longer range version uses a 61 kilowatt-hour battery and a 108 kilowatt motor with a WLTP range of 448 kilometers. For city and suburban Australian driving, that would be more than enough for plenty of buyers, especially if Kia could get the price right. A small Kia EV with proper warranty support, dealer backup, familiar branding, and useful real-world range would absolutely have a place here, but it cannot be priced like a novelty. Meredith's comments suggest Kia Australia has not given up. He compared the situation to the Picanto, saying that when he first started at Kia, he was keen to get the Picanto into the local lineup, even though he was told it was not possible for several reasons. Kia kept pushing, and the Picanto went on to become an important entry level for the brand in Australia. His view on the EV2 is similar. Kia will not say no until every part of the business case has been looked at. So, the EV2 is not confirmed, but it's not dead either. It is a car Kia Australia would probably love to have, because affordable EVs are becoming one of the most important parts of the market. However, the hard truth is that wanting a small electric Kia and being able to sell one profitably at a competitive Australian price are two very different things. If Kia cannot land the EV2 far enough below the EV3 and close enough to the Chinese rivals, it may be better not to bother bringing it at all. Kia's electric commercial plans do not stop with vans either. The brand is also developing a ladder frame pickup with battery electric and extended range electric options targeted for launch by 2030. It is aimed at the US and expected to use a traditional frame for towing and off-road ability. The catch is that because it is US focused, it may be engineered for left-hand drive only. Now, if that happens, Australia could miss out, just as our ute market is finally starting to electrify. Got things like the BYD Shark 6, the GWM Canon Alpha plug-in hybrid, Ford Ranger plug-in hybrid, LDV has its ute coming, JAC Hunter plug-in hybrid. Yes, I know, plug-in hybrid, not full BEV, but we're getting there. So, Kia's Australian EV picture is split. The PHEV is real, priced, and about to land here any moment. The EV2, possible, but only if the business case works, and the future electric ute could be exactly the sort of thing Australia wants, but only if Kia builds it for right-hand drive. Porsche has revealed the Cayenne Coupe Electric, the sleeker version of its upcoming full-electric Cayenne SUV. It shares the same basic dimensions as the SUV in length and wheelbase at 4,985mm long with a 3,023mm wheelbase. However, the coupe roofline makes it about 24mm lower. The drag coefficient improves from 0.25 to 0.23, and Porsche says that gives the coupe around 15 kilometers more range than the equivalent SUV variant. And the trade-off is, of course, boot space. The regular Cayenne electric SUV offers 781 litres with its rear seats in use and 1588 litres folded. The coupe drops to 534 litres and 1347 litres respectively. That is still usable, but it's a big penalty for that sleeker look and that 15 k's of range. The coupe keeps the 90-litre frunk and the same 3.5-tonne towing capacity, which is a major figure for Australian buyers who want premium EV towing ability, although towing range will still be the real-world question. Now, 3 variants will be offered. The entry-level Cayenne Coupe Electric produces 300 kilowatts normally, rising to 325 kilowatts on overboost, with a claimed 0-100 time of 4.8 seconds and a 230 km/h top speed. The Cayenne S Coupe Electric lifts that to 400 kilowatts normally and 490 kilowatts on overboost, with a claimed 3.8 second sprint and a 250 km/h top speed. The flagship Turbo Coupe Electric is the headline car, 630 kilowatts in normal use, up to 850 kilowatts on launch control, and 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 2.5 seconds, and a 260 km/h top speed. That's quick. Range is expected to peak at 658 kilometers for the base grade, 666 kilometers for the S, and 632 kilometers for the Turbo Coupe Electric. Again, those are not Australian real-world towing figures, but they are strong for a large luxury performance SUV. Porsche will also offer an optional lightweight sport package with a carbon roof, carbon trim, special 22-inch wheels, high-performance tyres, Pepita fabric seat centers, a Racetex headliner, and more carbon fiber than you can poke a sticker. Depending on the model, it saves up to 17.6 kilograms, which is not a massive reduction in a large electric SUV, but it's Porsche being Porsche. Australian pricing is already pretty clear. The regular Cayenne electric SUV is priced from $167,800 before on roads, the S from $193,000, and the Turbo from $259,900. Don't forget that $900. The Coupe will start at $173,600 before on roads, the S Coupe at $194,600, and the Turbo Coupe at $272,100. Local arrivals are expected shortly after the SUV lands later this year. This is not a mass market EV story, but it matters because Porsche is proving that big battery electric SUVs can do serious towing numbers, serious range numbers, and absurd performance numbers all at the same time. The hard truth is price and weight. These are expensive, heavy machines, and the Turbo Coupe is almost comically powerful. But for buyers who would otherwise be in a petrol Cayenne Turbo GT or a Range Rover Sport SV or an AMG SUV, Porsche is making the electric option very hard to ignore. Audi has facelifted the Q4 e-tron in Europe with a redesigned interior, improved efficiency, more range, faster charging, and bidirectional charging. The Q4 continues in 2 body styles, the more practical SUV and the sleekier Sportback. Outside, the changes are pretty mild, some revised bumpers, a cleaner front end, a body colour grille instead of that silver, and updated lighting. Inside is where the big changes happen. The dashboard has been completely redesigned with an 11.9-inch digital instrument display and a 12.8-inch infotainment screen, plus an optional 12-inch passenger display. The technical updates are even more important. Audi says improved motors and power electronics increase efficiency by around 10%. The updated Q4 Sportback e-tron performance version reaches up to 367 miles of a WLTP, which is about 591 kilometers, and that is pending final UK confirmation. Across the range, the improvement is around 10 to 20 miles depending on configuration. Larger battery versions now charge at up to 185 kilowatts DC. That's up from 175, giving a claimed 10 to 80% charge time of around 27 minutes and up to 115 miles of charge added in 10 minutes in ideal conditions. The big news is bidirectional charging, the first time in an Audi EV. The Q4 e-tron supports the ability to send energy out of the battery, not just receive it. Vehicle to load lets the car power devices such as e-bikes, camping gear, tools, just through a socket or an adapter. In selected European markets, vehicle-to-home capability can allow the Q4 to act as household energy storage, especially when paired with solar. That is particularly relevant for us Aussies. We have a very high rooftop solar uptake, rising interest in home batteries, and more households thinking about V2H and V2G. However, the usual Australian caveat applies. European capability does not automatically mean Australian approval, compatible wall boxes, local grid support, or customer access. Audi Australia has not yet confirmed local details for the facelifted Q4, so this is one to watch rather than a promise. Chery is becoming one of the most aggressive players in the Australian market, and it is no longer just about Chery-branded SUVs. The Chery-backed Lepas brand is heading to Australia with electric models, including the L4 and L6, aimed at international and right-hand drive markets. The Lepas L4 is expected to use a 67.1 kilowatt-hour battery and a 160 kilowatt motor in other markets, with around 400 kilometers of range and a DC charge time of under 30 minutes at the right charger. The L4 is closely related to the next generation Chery Tiggo 5, which stands to reason, being the same overarching brand there, and it measures around 4,415 millimeters long, 1,817 millimeters wide, and 1,630 millimeters tall, with a 2,700 millimeter wheelbase. It will sit below the larger L6 and L8, and it is being pitched as a more affordable Chinese alternative to premium small electric SUVs like the Volvo EX30, the BMW iX1, the Zeekr X, and upcoming Mercedes-Benz GLA Electric. The local pricing is not confirmed, but it is expected to sit above the Omoda JQ J5 EV, which has had an introductory drive-away offer of $36,990 in Australia. That means the L4 could land in the busy zone between budget EVs and premium compact SUVs, exactly where Australian buyers are starting to get more choice. Then there is iCar, expected to be renamed iCaur, which is I-C-A-U-R. I think it'll still be pronounced iCar locally, and that's because of a trademark conflict with Apple. iCar is Chery's lifestyle-focused electric and extended range off-road brand, and it is now confirmed for Australia and New Zealand in early 2027. I do think we were supposed to see this brand in 2026, but obviously things have been delayed there. Its local lineup is expected to be led by the V27, a large, boxy, extended range electric SUV that pairs a 1.5 litre turbo petrol generator with an LFP battery. In all drive form, it has a 34 kilowatt-hour battery, a claimed 150 kilometers of electric-only range, up to 995 kilometers total range on the NED cycle, 335 kilowatts, 505 newton meters of torque, and a claimed 0-100 time of 5.9 seconds. The V24 is not small. It measures 5,045 millimeters long, 1,976 millimeters wide, and 1,894 millimeters tall, making it larger than a Denza B5 and even larger than a Land Rover Defender 110. That's a big beast. A smaller V25 is expected to follow, and the fully electric V23, which uses a 81 kilowatt-hour battery, makes 155 kilowatts and 292 newton meters of torque and claims of 430 kilometers of range. It's also a strong candidate once right-hand drive production begins. This is where the Australian market gets interesting but also messy. Chery already has Chery and Omoda JQ here, and it is also lining up Lepas, Jetour, Freelander, and iCar. More choice is good, but too many brands can confuse buyers. The test will not just be the launch hype. It will be dealer coverage, parts, warranty handling, resale values, software updates, and whether Australians understand which Chery-backed brand does what. Nissan has revealed two plug-in hybrid SUVs in China, the boxy Terrano plug-in hybrid and the sleeker urban PHEV. Both are production bound within 12 months, and Nissan says the Terrano will be exported to selected global markets. Australia is a strong possibility because Nissan has already signalled a major shift in its Australian product plans, with China becoming a key export hub. This matters because Nissan Australia has been light on fresh electrified product compared with some of its rivals. You've got the Leaf, which is very aged, the Aria, which took forever to get here and never became a major local player, and e-Power has carried much of Nissan's electrification story here without even being a plug-in system. So, yeah. Anyway, a Terrano plug-in hybrid or urban plug-in hybrid would give Nissan something more directly aligned with the current Australian market shift, where plug-in SUVs and utes are getting attention from people who want electric driving but are still worrying about long-distance use, towing and charging availability, or regional travel. LDV is also moving in that direction in China. It has announced a plug-in hybrid versions of its T60 and T70 and Terron 9 utes, with potential relevance for Australia. The next T70 would likely wear the familiar T60 badge locally if introduced. LDV already sells the diesel T60 here from 41 grand drive away, and the electric ET60 at 92,990 plus on-road costs, with a 130 kilowatt and 310 newton meter rear drive motor and up to 330 kilometers WLTP range. However, the ET60 has always been a hard sell because of its high price and limited towing and work appeal. A plug-in hybrid ute could be much more realistic for Australian tradies and fleets. The rivals, they're lining up fast. Shark 6, Canon Alpha plug-in hybrid, Ranger plug-in hybrid, the JAC Hunter plug-in hybrid, and potentially the LDV's T70, T60, and Terron 9 plug-in hybrids. This is the part of the market where full battery electric has struggled because of towing, payload, highway range, and remote charging are still real issues. Plug-in hybrids and EREV utes are not the final destination. However, they may be the bridge Australian ute buyers actually accept in large numbers. Zeekr is taking the same bridging idea up market. Its 8X and 9X SUVs are locked in for Australia either very late in 2026 or sometime in 2027. And they launch with extended range electric drivetrains. They use a 205 kilowatt, 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine, either 2 or 3 electric motors, and 55.1 or 70 kilowatt hour batteries. Dual motor versions produce 660 kilowatts and 935 newton meters, while tri-motor versions produce a huge 1030 kilowatts and 1410 newton meters. Electric only range is around 350 to 400 kilometers on China's CLTC test, with total combined range well over 1,000 kilometers. Zeekr's European chief engineer says the 8X and 9X started from a BEV platform and could easily become a full battery electric model later by removing the engine and fuel tank and fitting a bigger battery. He also says these vehicles drive more like EVs than conventional plug-in hybrids because the engine is disconnected from the wheels at lower speeds and mainly acts as a generator, only mechanically connecting above 80 kilometers an hour for efficiency. For Australia, that is a very relevant distinction. A normal plug-in hybrid with 60 to 100 kilometers of EV range can be brilliant if charged daily, however inefficient if never plugged in. An EREV with 300 plus kilometers of electric range changes that equation. It means most daily and weekly driving can be electric, while the petrol generator is there for long trips, towing or poor charging access. It's not as clean as pure EV, however for some Australian use cases it may be a better stepping stone than pretending everyone can jump straight into a full BEV overnight. Hyundai has increased the driveway price of the entry-level Inster in Victoria by $3,000, lifting it to $38,990 drive-away after earlier promotional pricing had brought it down to $35,990 drive-away. The Inster launched in Australia in April 2025 from $39,000 plus on roads, and Hyundai says the price move follows a surge in demand across its EV range. The awkward part for Hyundai is that the affordable EV space has moved quickly. The BYD Atto 1 starts from $23,990 before on roads. The Atto 2 small SUV starts from $31,990 plus on roads. So while the Inster remains distinctive, a small, city-friendly, 4-seat EV with a fun design, it no longer gets to stand alone as the cute, affordable option. At nearly $39,000 drive away in base form, buyers will compare it with the much larger and more practical Chinese rivals. At the other end of the pricing mood, Volvo has cut the EX30 and EX40 pricing by up to $11,300, saying the repositioning is designed to make its electric lineup more accessible in Australia. Volvo says it currently offers 4 electric models locally and still aims to become a fully electric car maker and reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. This is the EV market maturing in real time. Some brands are lifting prices where demand is strong, others are cutting because competition is biting. Buyers are getting more choice, but they also need to be careful. A discount is only useful if the car suits your use case. You've got the charging speed to think about. Is the range right? Is the resale story make sense? A higher price is only justified if the product, warranty, service, and ownership experience is there to back it up. Here's an interesting story. It's a case involving a Tesla Model Y taxi with nearly 180,000 kilometers on the odometer and almost exclusively charged by DC fast charging. Now, according to data reported from the car's diagnostic port, the vehicle had taken only 36 kilowatt hours from AC charging over its life, with the 32,684 kilowatt hours coming from DC fast charging or regenerative braking. Battery health was reportedly still 92%. Now, that does not prove fast charging is harmless. One car, it's not the whole market, and that Model Y used an LFP battery, which is generally more tolerant of regular high states of charge than many NMC packs. But it does support the idea that modern EV batteries are not as fragile as some people still think. Battery degradation is real, but it often happens more early in life and then tapers. And modern thermal management and battery chemistry matter enormously. For Australian buyers, the practical advice is still balanced. If you can slow charge at home, that remains the cheapest and gentlest way to run an EV. However, occasional or even regular fast charging does not automatically destroy a battery. Taxis, rideshare vehicles, delivery cars, and long-distance drivers need more real-world data, and we're finally starting to get it. The more EVs that reach high mileage, the less we will need to argue based on old assumptions. And finally, a local industry story that is less flashy than a 850 kilowatt Porsche, but arguably more important. Australia is funding a trial of electric kiln technology that could help produce cleaner battery materials on shore. ARENA's Dan Miller said the project is an important step in building Australia's capability to produce low-emissions battery materials locally and capture more value from the clean energy transition. The broader issue is that Australia has a lot of the resources needed for batteries, but we often export raw or lightly processed materials instead of capturing more of the value chain here. If low emissions processing can be done locally, it can support cleaner EV batteries, more skilled jobs, and a stronger domestic clean tech industry. Global lithium-ion demand grew by 20% in 2025 to a market worth around US $150 billion. That's according to the International Energy Agency reporting referenced in coverage of the project. For an Australian EV podcast, this is the part of the story that goes beyond what car is in the showroom. Cleaner cars need cleaner supply chains. If Australia wants to be more than a quarry for the battery age, projects like this really matter. And that's a wrap for this episode of Plugged In Australia. The big theme is choice. Bigger EV SUVs, electric vans, small EVs fighting tough pricing battles, plug-in utes, extended range off-roaders, some price cuts, some price hikes, and battery tech moving faster than the public conversation sometimes can keep up with it. As always, the promise is exciting, but the details matter. Australian pricing, timing, charging support, and real-world use will decide what actually works here. Thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, stay plugged in and stay charged. Ci vediamo.